Then Brendan Varma, the spokesman for the President of the General Assembly, will update you as well on the activities of the President of the General Assembly. The Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General continuing their activities pegged to the 72nd session of the General Assembly, attending a large number of high-level events and bilateral meetings. We'll keep flooding your email boxes with readouts and other statements. This morning, the Secretary General had a working breakfast with the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the foreign minister level, and spoke at a ministerial level on youth, peace and security, and a meeting on a high-level panel on water. There'll be other events this afternoon, including on South Sudan, Somalia, and famine response and prevention, and we'll provide details as those go on. And this morning, the Deputy Secretary General participated in a high-level meeting on the humanitarian situation in Nigeria and the Lake Chad region. She said the widespread violence that has left more than 10 million people across the region in need of emergency assistance, and called on partners to step up their efforts and help fund the $1.5 billion humanitarian appeal. And her statement has been made available to you. I have a statement on Nepal. The Secretary General welcomes the holding of the 3rd phase of the local elections on September 18th and congratulates the people of Nepal for the peaceful conduct of the polls. This marks a crucial step in the transition towards federalism as enshrined in the 2015 Constitution, and will be followed by elections to state assemblies and federal parliament. The Secretary General encourages the government of Nepal and political parties to continue their efforts towards ensuring peaceful and inclusive upcoming elections. He also encourages all stakeholders to continue to implement the implementation of the Constitution in line with its principles of inclusion and representative governance. The UN stands ready to support such efforts. And back here, the Security Council this morning unanimously adopted a resolution on Daesh. The Council requested the Secretary General set up an investigative team to support Iraq's effort to hold Daesh accountable for violations and abuse of international law by collecting, preserving, and storing evidence in the country of acts that could amount to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possibly genocide. The new investigative team should be headed by a special advisor. The resolution will be online shortly, if it's not already so. Turning to the ongoing relief efforts in Myanmar and Bangladesh, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that the number of Rohingya refugees fleeing from Myanmar into Bangladesh has reached 429,000 people. Heavy rains have caused the majority of shelters in low-lying areas to flood, hampering even furthermore the delivery of aid. OCHA stresses that funding is urgently needed to scale up distribution. Meanwhile, the International Organization for Migration is airlifting 100 tons of supplies, including foods and tents, donated by Saudi Arabia to help Rohingya refugees who fled into Bangladesh. The supplies are scheduled to arrive early tomorrow morning, and IOM will be organizing a convoy of some 20 trucks to deliver it to Cox's Bazar. More than half of the people who've arrived in Bangladesh from Myanmar are still living in makeshift camps with little access to shelter, food, clean water, or sanitation, according to IOM. And turning to Mexico, you will have seen we issued a statement expressing the Secretary General's sadness at the loss of life and his solidarity with the people and government of Mexico. That was 2 days ago, I believe. Meanwhile, OCHA tells us that a 6-member UN disaster assessment and coordination team was deployed to Mexico yesterday in support of the resident coordinator and with agreement of the government. The team will assist with assessment, information and management and the coordination of the various search and rescue teams in country. And as for Hurricane Maria, UN teams are ready to deploy to islands should they be impacted and request assistance. We've deployed teams to assist regional and national authorities in assessing the storm's impact, identifying immediate humanitarian needs, and coordinating the distribution of pre-positioned UN stock. And of course, humanitarian partners continue to work and coordinate with regional organizations and local governments throughout the country impacted by Irma, the hurricane that hit previously. A new website has been created with more details at unocha.org. And our colleagues at UNEP The UN Environment Programme have announced a partnership with Discovery Communications to raise awareness about the planet's most pressing environmental challenges and to highlight innovative solutions to address them. Together, both partners will develop original content about nature with a strong conservation angle, empowering individuals and communities to make a difference. The content will be distributed through broadcast and online channels of both Discovery Communications and the United Nations. And also I want to flag a new report by UNICEF entitled Early Moments Matter for Every Child. It finds that only 15 countries worldwide have 3 essential national policies that support families with young children. These policies include offering families 2 years of pre-primary education, paying breastfeeding breaks for new mothers for the first 6 months, and adequately paying parental leave. The report notes that Cuba, France, Portugal, Russia, and Sweden are among the countries that guarantee all 3 policies. However, 85 million children under 5 are growing up in 32 countries without any of the 3 critical policies in place. 40% of those 85 million children live in just 2 countries, Bangladesh and the United States. More information online. And the FAO issued its quarterly crop prospect and food situation report today. It says that robust harvests in Latin America and rebounding agricultural conditions in southern Africa are on course to improve the global food supply situation. However, ongoing civil conflict and climate-related stocks are affecting progress towards hunger reduction. Some 37 out of 28 countries which are in Africa require external assistance for food. And today is International Peace Day. The theme for 2017 is Together for Peace, Respect, Safety, and Dignity for All. In his message today, the Secretary General said we must resist cynical efforts to divide communities and portray neighbors as the other. Together, let us stand up against bigotry for human rights. Let us build bridges, and let us transform fear into hope. And today we welcome Malawi and the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the honor roll, as they've both paid their regular budget dues in full, bringing us up to 131 member states. As I mentioned, Brendan will brief us right after this. And at 2:30 in this room, there will be a press conference by the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. 3 p.m. General Assembly stakeout on the 3rd floor of the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Mexico. And at 3:15 back here, there'll be a press conference by the UN Industrial Development Organization on the 3rd Industrial Development Decade for Africa. And we'll be sending an update list for tomorrow's press conferences as we get them. Halas. Oleg.
Thanks, Steph. On the resolution adopted by the Security Council, is the Secretary General concerned that it covers only ISIS crimes and does not cover the possible crimes committed by the Iraqi forces, security forces, Kurdish forces, and international coalition?
You know, I think for when you're dealing with possible with incidents that involve possible crimes by governments or coalition, there are mechanisms and responsibilities that are in place to ensure or to at least work towards accountability. I think when you're dealing with an organizations like Daesh, it's a different framework. Yes, sir.
Follow up. Would you welcome adopting such a resolution, for example, in Syria?
I think we would welcome any effort. And first of all, if I'm not mistaken, in Syria there already is an accountability mechanism in place that's been.
I mean by the Security Council, which is much.
I think we would welcome any efforts that would strengthen the accountability and help bring justice to those civilians who have suffered through years and years of war. Mr. Lee.
I don't know if you have anything on this yet, but President Trump has just announced additional sanctions on financial institutions that facilitate trade with North Korea. And I wanted to know whether the Secretary General, he's spoken a lot on the topic, does he believe that this is a positive step toward resolving?
I haven't seen personally the report. I think the Secretary General's position on North Korea was made fairly explicit by him in his speech to General Assembly.
Speaking of speeches to the General Assembly, the President of Haiti, Mr. Moises, said in his speech, devoted quite a bit of it to the UN following through on what the Secretary General announced about the new approach. And he named specifically the 2 tracks and said the money should begin to come. I wanted to know, can you give any update on money that has actually been devoted thus far? And number two, has Josette Sheeran been operating during this General Assembly week to try to
Yes, very
drum up
much
support?
so. I mean, I know she's been having meetings. She, I think, will participate in the meeting of the Secretary General with the Haitian leader. I don't think I have an updated figure for you on the money. What is clear is that the money, we're continually trying to raise money, but already the country team has spent quite a lot of deployed quite a lot of resources on the issue, even before this new approach has been announced.
Can she do some kind of Mr. Salome, to his credit, did a stakeout. Can she do some sort of a
I think
press
she'll.
interaction?
I think she'll probably do some sort of a press availability in the weeks ahead. Okay. Yes, sir.
Devjot from Quartz. On Myanmar, you'd mentioned that your humanitarian colleagues were trying to figure out a financial number of how much money would be required. Do you have a number?
I
that
don't
you can
have that
share?
number as of yet.
Okay. And a second question on Myanmar. The Indian government has told the Supreme Court that it's not going to adhere to the policy of non-refoulement with regard to Rohingya refugees, and has again raised concerns about the terror threat that Rohingya refugees face. As the crisis in Myanmar mounts, are you disappointed by the approach that the Indian government's taken?
We believe that every government, whether or not they're a signatory to the Refugee Convention, should treat people fleeing conflict, who are fleeing because their lives are at risk, with the utmost respect, and people should not be sent back facing risks and putting their lives, when they have their lives their lives are at risk. But now, obviously, this is not to say that countries have a responsibility to ensure that their populations remain safe. But there are overarching, we believe there are overarching principles that need to be held up. Matthew.
Ask you about Burundi. There's been two things. The Secretary General of the ruling party, CNDD-FDD, has been quoted saying that if the UN deploys the 228 police officers that were mandated by the Security Council, quote, "we will fight and annihilate them in 2 hours." This is, again, it's a ruling party. It's not an NGO or a gang. So I wanted to know, what's the response? I've been trying to find Mr. Kafando. What's the response of the UN system to a direct physical threat to annihilate UN peacekeepers?
I haven't seen the exact quote. We unfortunately know where the issue of the deployment stands, despite a unanimous resolution of the Security Council.
And I'd asked you about Viviane van de Peer previously. She was supposed to be the head of the office in Bujumbura. I've now heard that the UN has basically taken her name off the table and given in to the government, not wanting to give her a visa. Can you find out if that's true, and if so, how does the UN decide when to kind of go public on the restrictions on on its staff being deployed, as for example it did in Sudan, and in this case not saying?
I think it would be on a case-by-case basis. I'll try to find the situation. Yes, ma'am.
Can you elaborate further? I know that you had said Secretary General asked again for the release of the former UN official to President Rouhani. Can you elaborate and what the response was, or?
No, I mean, I speak for one side. I can tell you that this is an issue the Secretary General brought up on a humanitarian basis, asking for Mr. Bakar's release. We now have to wait and see. We very much hope that he will be released.
Are you updated at all on his condition? I know he recently received a pacemaker.
I think on that you should speak to our colleagues at UNICEF. Yes, Matthew.
Sure. I have some other one. I want to be sure to ask this one during this week of these bilats. You'd said previously that you're not the media center, ce n'est pas vous. So, okay. But I do want to know, is there a UN role in these bilaterals? Some of them have been taking place in GA 200, right? And so, they say it's pooled, it's too small. I asked to go cover the one about Egypt. I wasn't allowed to. But what I want to ask is, who does decide that? Because my understanding is actually an Egyptian state media went to it without a camera or anything else. And so it's not specific to that so much as to say whether it's you or the Secretariat, given that these are meetings of the Secretary General. If he meets with the government, who decides who gets to cover it? I understand there may be limitations, but even within those limitations,
There is when there are space limitations, a pool is organized, and I think there's an agreement with UNCA to provide a one non-visual reporter to do color for each meeting.
But do you think it's appropriate that that be a media that's controlled by the very government?
I think what's appropriate is that it's a decision taken by the Correspondents Association. Thank you.